fix this engine. I'll give you my salary, said the millionaire CEO. The mechanic made one move and left him pale. Before we begin, comment below and tell us, where are you watching from? Which city are you in? And when it's over, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. If you can fix this engine. The billionaire smirked. I'll give you my entire salary. The woman didn't blink. She just wiped her hands on a rag, stained with oil and memory, looked him in the eyes, and asked, cash or card? And in that moment, under the hood of a dying classic car, something shifted. Not just the engine, but everything he thought he knew about pride, legacy, and love. Where engines go to die. Brentwood, Tennessee, the kind of town where time moved slower than traffic on a Sunday. The air smelled like fresh grass and fading memories, and the streets knew the sound of every engine by heart. Robert Mitchell pulled his Chevelle SS to a coughing halt in front of the last place he ever thought he'd stop, Barnes & Sons Auto Repair. The sign was cracked, the paint peeled, and 2 letters were missing. The rest of the garage looked like it had lost a fight with time and didn't care. He muttered under his breath, "Is this where engines go to die?" The door creaked as he stepped in. Expensive leather shoes crunching over years of oil and sawdust. At the back of the garage, someone was bent under the hood of an old Ford truck. Faded jeans, greasy boots, hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. "Excuse me," Robert said, still riding high on sarcasm. "Is there someone here who knows how to fix a real engine? A classic?" The figure straightened. She was young. Much younger than he expected, face streaked with grease, eyes sharp with something harder than steel. "I'm the mechanic," she said. "Sarah Barnes." He blinked. "You?" She nodded, calm, confident, not trying to impress, not even trying to explain. He smirked. "Miss, I've been to 7 of the top shops in Nashville. No one could fix it. Engineers with decades of experience couldn't even identify the problem." Sarah leaned against the truck bumper, arms crossed, and shrugged. "That only happened because you didn't come here first." She said it without blinking, without ego, just fact. And something about that annoyed him more than it should have. He laughed, mockingly. "Tell you what, if you fix this engine, I'll give you my entire salary." She tilted her head. "All right, but I want it in cash." He stared at her, mouth slightly open. She wasn't joking. Sarah walked over to a dusty cabinet, pulled out a scarred old toolbox with a name etched in faded marker. "E. Barnes." She opened it, like it held a secret worth protecting. "Pop the hood," she asked. Robert did, almost without thinking. She leaned in close. Didn't just look at the engine. She listened, really listened, using a piece of hose like a stethoscope, brushing her fingers gently over the ignition line. In less than 10 minutes, she removed 2 parts, made a subtle adjustment, cleaned something with a tiny, bristled brush. "Try it now," she said. Stepping back, he turned the key. The Chevelle didn't just start, it roared. Deep, clean, confident. Robert stepped out, stunned. "How did you?" he stammered. It was just a reversed connection in the ignition system. "Your engine was trying to tell you. You just didn't know how to listen." He stared at her, and for the first time in a long time, Robert Mitchell, the CEO of Mitchell Automotive Industries, felt utterly speechless. "How much do I owe you?" he asked, half afraid of the answer. She didn't flinch. "Your salary." He laughed nervously. "I was joking." She stepped closer, voice calm but sharp. "My dad used to say, a man's word is the word of a king, and a king doesn't go back on it. Are you a man, Mr. Mitchell?" He swallowed hard. "I'll bring it tomorrow." She gave a nod, already turning back to her work. "I'll be here." And just like that, without raising her voice or lifting a finger, the girl with grease-stained hands had brought a billionaire to his knees, not with charm, not with flirtation, but with quiet competence and the sound of an engine that finally sang Chapter 1. Us. The deal. The next morning, Robert Mitchell arrived at the garage with an envelope full of cash and an ego still sore from yesterday's lesson. He had barely slept, not because of the money. $15,000 meant little to him. It was the way she looked at him after fixing the Chevelle, like she wasn't surprised at all, like he had been the last one to realize he was wrong. She was already there, of course, elbow deep in the guts of an old Ford. Same grease-stained jeans, same calm focus. When she finally noticed him, she didn't even straighten up. "Oh, you came back," she said, wiping her hands on that same dirty rag. "I thought maybe your pride would cost less than your salary." Robert raised an eyebrow, reached into his blazer, and pulled out the thick envelope. 15,000. In cash. She took it without blinking, flipped through the bills quickly, and nodded. No thank you. No smirk. She slid it into a drawer behind a stack of old manuals like it was pocket change. He cleared his throat. "So, about yesterday." She didn't answer, just kept working on the engine in front of her. "There's an engine at my factory," he said. "Been giving my team hell for weeks. No one can figure out why it keeps losing power. You interested?" She didn't look at him, just kept tightening bolts with steady hands. "Why would I be?" He shifted, unused to being ignored. Curiosity, money, you name it. That's when she stopped, turned around, rag in hand, and looked him square in the face. "If I fix it, you treat me with respect. No more calling me Miss Barnes like I'm your assistant. No more raised eyebrows when I walk in the room. No more wondering if I just got lucky." Robert hesitated. There was something in her voice, not anger, conviction. Something he hadn't felt in years. "Deal," he said. She held out her hand. Rough, calloused, strong. He shook it. Mitchell Automotive was a cold cathedral of steel and glass. Everything in its place, everyone in their suit. When Sarah walked into the engineering bay, she didn't belong, and she knew it. But she didn't shrink. "This is Sarah Barnes," Robert said to the room. "She's going to take a look." The engineers exchanged confused glances. One man, gray-haired and neatly pressed, stepped forward. "Is she a consultant?" "She's a mechanic," Robert answered, simply, firmly. Sarah walked straight to the V8 engine on the workbench. She didn't ask for specs. She didn't grab tools. She just listened. She walked around it like a detective at a crime scene. Then she reached into her pocket, pulled out a blue pen, and began scribbling notes on her forearm numbers. Arrows, sketches, no hesitation. "Can I take the head off?" she asked. "Go ahead," Robert replied. 15 minutes later, she pointed at a sensor. "Here, coolant, temperature, sensor. The problem's internal. Bad contact. Only fails under vibration. That's why your tests didn't catch it." The gray-haired man frowned. "We tested that 3 times. Sarah didn't even look at him. Not while the engine was running. She cleaned the contact, reconnected the wires, closed it all back up, and stepped away. Try it now." The engine started with a hum. Steady, clean, powerful. Silence fell over the room. Robert turned toward her, eyes wide. "You're a genius." She gave him a half smile. "I prefer mechanic." On the way out, Robert tried to understand what had just happened. The silence of his team, the pride in her walk, the shame in his chest. "How did you learn all this?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer right away. "My dad," she said finally. "He taught me everything I know." This was his life. Robert nodded, filing that name away in the back of his mind. Barnes. Something about that sounded familiar. She opened the door of her truck and paused, hand on the handle. "Next time you offer someone your salary," she said, Make sure they're not worth twice as much. She shut the door and drove off, leaving the smell of oil and truth behind her. Robert stood in the doorway of his factory, feeling the engine of his life stutter for the very first time, and he wasn't sure he wanted it fixed. Chapter 2. The File on Her. The hum of the Chevelle's newly tuned engine filled the underground parking lot like a taunt. Robert sat behind the wheel, unmoving, listening, not to the car, to his own thoughts. There was something about that girl, Sarah Barnes. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, didn't flinch in a room full of men in suits, fixed things without explanation, walked away without applause. He'd met hundreds of engineers, thousands of experts, but never someone who could silence a factory floor with a socket wrench and a raised eyebrow. Back at his office, he sat behind his desk with the city of Nashville glittering behind him. Normally, he'd be reviewing quarterly reports or trimming expense lines on proposals. Instead, he stared at her name, scrawled on a yellow post-it, Sarah Barnes, and beneath it, E. Barnes. His father had always said, "Don't waste time chasing the past. The future prints the checks." But Robert couldn't shake the feeling that the past had just walked into his garage and turned over the ignition. He buzzed Jennifer on the intercom. "Can you bring me access to the old archives? The digital ones? No, the physical ones. Basement records, 1980s to early 90s. Engineering consultants." A pause. "That's a lot of boxes." "Sir, I know." 2 hours later, he was standing in a cold, dimly lit basement beneath the corporate tower that bore his family's name, Mitchell Automotive. The floor smelled like paper and mildew. Rows of metal shelves reached the ceiling like confessionals. All the things no one wanted to deal with anymore were buried here, forgotten in favor of new tech and sleeker brochures. He started pulling boxes. Supplier contracts. Boring. Meeting minutes from 1988. Useless. And then on the spine of a cracked cardboard box, he saw it. Barnes Project. Confidential. Cannot teach your high nine cheer. Kumari nights sekin chirinin ansi tansien dert. He opened it like he was disarming a bomb. Inside, diagrams, sketches, handwritten formulas in tidy print. At the top of the first page, John E., Barnes Technical Consultant. March 15th, 1987. Robert's stomach dropped. The layout was unmistakable. A prototype for an early electronic fuel injection system. The same one his father had famously innovated and patented in 1990. He flipped the page. Another design, this one for a more efficient cooling system. Then another, and another, all signed. John Edward Barnes. And none of them credited on any official patent record. At the bottom of the stack, a yellowed envelope. Inside, a letter. Mr. Mitchell, as we discussed yesterday, I confirm that I will no longer be able to provide consulting services to your company. Personal circumstances are forcing me to leave Nashville, making it impossible to continue our partnership. Thank you for the opportunity. I trust the projects I developed over the last 2 years will be useful for the growth of Mitchell Automotive. Sincerely, John Edward Barnes. The tone was professional. Too professional. Cold. And Robert knew cold when he saw it. He had written plenty of similar letters himself to let people down without admitting guilt. He dug deeper. Another folder. Notes in his father's handwriting. Barnes wants public credit. Remind him that consulting is confidential by nature. Offer bonus if needed. If he refuses, terminate. Robert leaned back against the shelf, stunned. Sarah's father wasn't just a mechanic. He was the mind behind the very systems Mitchell Automotive had built its fortune on. And Gerald Mitchell Roberts' own father had bought that brilliance, buried the name, and walked away with the glory. Robert clenched the letter in his fist. He looked at the dusty papers, then at his own reflection in the glass of an old cabinet. The man looking back wore a $4 Orny watch. A man whose reputation, his wealth, his entire legacy had been built on a lie. That night, Robert didn't go home. He sat in his corner office with the lights off, the city sparkling outside. But all he could see was a garage in Brentwood, a girl with grease on her cheek, her father's name etched into an old toolbox, and now, etched into his guilt, he called Jennifer again. Pull every file you can on John Barnes. I want to know everything. She hesitated. Is this about a lawsuit? No, it's about the truth. The next day, he visited the Vanderbilt University Engineering Library. He pulled journals, trade publications, technical reports from the 1980s, and every time he found echoes of Barnes, techniques that showed up years before their time, innovations that other companies only adopted a decade later. John Barnes wasn't just an engineer, he was a visionary, and no one even knew his name. At 2:00 in the afternoon, Robert walked into a small print shop on Broadway, a place that still did custom leather embossing. He brought a worn technical manual, handwritten notes, diagrams. Can you restore this? He asked the gray-bearded owner. The man nodded. Sure, old leather. Shouldn't take long. Robert hesitated. Can you engrave something on the front? Of course. He wrote carefully on a piece of paper. John Edward Barnes, pioneer and visionary. Mini sign unearned 55. Dudis Honinishin. The man looked up. Important person. Robert nodded. More than I ever knew. That evening, back in his apartment, Robert stared at the manual, now wrapped in blue paper. He thought about Sarah, about the way she talked to engines like they had names, about the little boy at the shop who called her a hero. And he knew he couldn't run from this. He had to tell her. The next morning, he called the shop. She answered. Casual, like always, Barnes and Sons. Sarah, it's Robert. A pause. Problem with the Chevelle already. No, the car's perfect. It's something else. She was quiet. It's about your father. Longer silence. What about him? I think you deserve to know the truth. Can I come by tomorrow? Another pause. Come early, before the day gets loud. I will. He hung up, and in the silence that followed, the engine of his conscience kept turning for the first time in his life. Chapter 3. The Reveal. The morning air in Brentwood was thick with humidity and ghosts, the kind that linger between wrench turns and regret. Sarah was already under a lifted Dodge Ram when Robert arrived, dressed down for once, no blazer, no bodyguard SUV, just jeans and a navy button-down that still looked too clean for the place. She didn't look up. Give me a minute. She called from under the truck. Robert stood there, box in hand, unsure where to put it or himself. When she finally slid out, wiping her hands on the same tattered rag, her eyes met his with something unreadable. Not cold, but not warm either. I brought something, he said, holding out the package like an apology in wrapping paper. She raised an eyebrow. If it's another envelope of money, I'm not interested. He cracked a smile. No, this is something different. She took the box carefully, unwrapped the paper with her fingers, slow and silent. When the manual appeared leather-bound, embossed, almost reverent, her breath caught. Where did you find this? She asked, voice low. In the Mitchell Automotive Archives, he said, buried under 3 decades of dust. She turned the manual over like it might shatter. Her eyes skimmed the spine. The title then froze on the engraved gold letters. John Edward Barnes, pioneer and visionary. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Then she laughed. It wasn't a joyful laugh. It was the kind that broke a little as it left her throat. My dad used to keep this in a drawer. No one was allowed to touch. I thought it was lost in a fire years ago. Robert swallowed. It wasn't, he said. It was stolen. Like everything else. She froze. What did you just say? He took a slow breath, feeling the ground shift beneath him. Your father, he said, designed the fuel system Mitchell Automotive became famous for. The documents were signed, dated, all in his handwriting. My father, Gerald Mitchell, filed patents off his work, offered him a bonus to keep quiet. When he refused, he was erased. Sarah said nothing, just stood there, holding the book like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I read the notes. I read your father's resignation letter. He didn't leave because of personal reasons. He was forced out, silenced. Still, she said nothing. So Robert kept going. And the worst part is, I didn't know. I built my career on a legacy I never questioned. Until you fixed that, Chevelle, and I saw your name, Barnes. I never thought to ask who came before me. Finally, her voice returned, but it was hollow. You want to thank you for doing the bare minimum a decent human being should have done 30 years ago. He shook his head. I don't know. I want to make it right. She placed the book gently on the workbench, like it belonged there all along. Make it right, she echoed. You can't give him his career back. You can't give my mother those years of watching him crumble. You can't fix the cancer that ate him alive because he worked himself into the ground trying to prove he mattered. Robert's face twisted. I'm not trying to fix the past. I want to build something different. With you. For him. For the truth. She turned, wiping her eyes quickly with her sleeve. And then, quieter. Why now? He didn't answer right away. Just looked at her, really looked. Because when you fixed that engine, something clicked. He said, you didn't just repair metal. You listened to it. You respected it. Like he did. And I realized, my whole life, I've been selling machines with no soul. But you, your dad, you built machines that breathed. A long silence hung between them. The fan buzzed in the corner. Outside, a bird called, the kind of stillness that comes only before a storm or a change. She spoke again. You want to honor my dad? Start by using your name to put his back where it belonged. I will. Good. And after that, maybe we could... No. Her voice was sharp, sudden. He stopped. I don't want to be your redemption project. Robert, she said, turning to face him fully. You can carry this guilt. You should. But don't come here thinking you get to fix it all with one truth and a pretty leather book. He nodded. Slow, humbled. I understand. She picked up the manual again. This time, she didn't flinch when her fingers touched the spine. You don't get to be the hero of this story. She added softly, I don't want to be, he whispered, and something in her eyes shifted. Just a flicker, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. A door hadn't opened between them, but maybe, just maybe, a window had cracked. Chapter 4, The Ghost Genius. After Robert left the garage, Sarah didn't move for a long time. The manual sat on the bench like a heartbeat she hadn't heard in years. She opened it slowly, letting the scent of old leather and motor oil rise up like a forgotten lullaby. The pages were still covered in her father's handwriting, precise, neat, patient, each line a thread of a mind that never stopped turning, never stopped dreaming. And beneath every note, every sketch, was a man the world never got to know. She flipped to a page she hadn't seen since she was a teenager. A simple diagram, just 3 cylinders and an arrow. But she remembered the night he showed it to her. They had been in the same garage long before it became hers. She was sitting on the floor, legs crossed, holding a flashlight while he talked. Engines are like people. Some take a while to start. Some stall when you push them too hard, and some just need to be heard. She didn't answer then, just nodded, but she remembered how he smiled, like she was the only person who ever listened. Now, all these years later, she finally understood what he meant. That afternoon, Chewy wandered in from school, dusty backpack slung over one shoulder, hands stained from helping the art teacher mix paint. "Hey," he said, tossing the bag by the door. "What's that?" Sarah didn't answer right away, just pushed the manual toward him. It belonged to someone who built better engines than anyone else I've ever known. Chewie flipped through it, wide-eyed. "Did you write this?" She shook her head. "My dad did." Chewie traced the diagrams with one small finger. "Looks kinda like your notes." She paused. "Yeah, I guess it does." In that moment, it hit her. She wasn't just fixing engines the way he taught her. She was thinking the way he did. Maybe she had more of him in her than she realized. The next day, she didn't expect Robert to return, but he did. No suit, just coffee. 2 cups. "I figured you'd like yours black," he said, holding one out awkwardly. "Strong, no sugar." She raised an eyebrow. "That obvious?" He smiled. "Just a guess." She took the cup, not because she needed it, but because it was the first thing he'd offered, without strings. They stood in silence for a while, sipping. "I want to start something," he said finally. "A foundation, in your father's name. Scholarships, trade programs, for kids who don't want to sit behind desks their whole lives." She didn't respond, just kept sipping. He continued, nervous now. "And I'd like you to run it. Co-run, at least. I don't want to do it without you." She looked at him, really looked, and what she saw wasn't the polished billionaire from the magazines. It was a man who was finally listening. "You said yesterday that my dad built engines that breathed," she said. He nodded. "Well, he also built people, quietly, without anyone knowing. And you can't just build a program and slap his name on it and call it a tribute. If this is real, it has to be earned." He set his cup down. "Tell me how." Later that week, she brought him to the back room of the garage, a room no one had entered in years. Dusty cabinets, old trophies, faded photographs. She handed him one, a picture of her father, maybe 40, holding a young Sarah on his shoulders at a local county fair, her hair in pigtails, his eyes laughing. "He was the smartest man I ever met," she said, "but he never got angry when people stole his credit. Not once. He just went quiet." Robert studied the photo. "I would have liked to know him." She took the picture back. "You'd have hated him." He laughed softly. "Probably." They spent the next hour cleaning the room. No words, just movement, dust cloths, trash bags, the occasional sneeze. At one point, Robert opened a drawer and pulled out an old cassette tape labeled May 12th, shop notes. Sarah took it gently. "My dad used to record ideas while working. Half of them are just him talking to himself." She popped it into a dusty old player on the shelf and hit play. The tape crackled to life. Then his voice. "Cylinder 3's running hot again. Might have to redesign the heat flow. Also, Sarah figured out the compression issue faster than I did today. Kid's got grease in her veins." She froze. Robert glanced over. "Play that again," she whispered. He did. Sarah figured out the compression issue faster than I did. Tears welled in her eyes, but didn't fall. This was what the world never saw. The quiet brilliance, the invisible father, the ghost genius behind a corporate empire. She turned the tape off and stood there in silence. That evening, Robert stood by the garage doors, watching the sun paint gold across the Chevelle. The engine purred like it had a story to tell. "You know," Sarah said, wiping her hands beside him. "You're not bad with a mop." He smiled. "Thanks. I've been told I'm a fast learner." She studied him a moment, then asked, "What's the first thing your dad taught you about engines?" He looked down. "That they exist to serve. If they stop serving, you replace them." She nodded. "Mine taught me the opposite." "Yeah," he said, "machines are like people. If they break, you find out why, and you fix it." Robert turned to her, something soft in his eyes. "Maybe your father should have raised me." She shrugged. Maybe you needed to break first. And for the first time since they met, she smiled at him, not out of amusement, but understanding. Chapter 5. The Fire Pit. The nights in Brentwood got quiet, in a way cities never understood. There were no sirens here, no neon lights blinking against apartment windows, just crickets, the rustle of old trees, and the distant hum of engines cooling after long days. Sarah stood behind the garage, arms crossed, staring at the rusted fire pit her father had welded from scrap years ago. It hadn't been lit in months, maybe years. But tonight, it felt like something needed to burn. Robert arrived around 8, hands in his jacket pockets, a bottle of Coke in one, a pack of marshmallows in the other. She blinked. You seriously brought s'mores? He shrugged. It's in the handbook for Southern apologies. Marshmallows, sugar, fire, awkward eye contact. Sarah cracked a smile small, but real. They lit the fire, let it build slowly. The flames licked the metal rim, casting soft light on Sarah's face, warming the cold edges of the silence between them. Chewy had gone to his aunt's for the night. The shop was locked. The town was asleep. It was just them now. After a while, Robert spoke. I don't know how to talk about my dad. Sarah poked at the fire with a stick. Why's that? He took a breath. Because everything I thought he was is a lie. He told me hard work built our empire, vision, leadership, but it was theft. Quiet, well documented, and sealed with bonuses. She looked up. You're allowed to grieve that, even if he was wrong. I'm not sure if I miss him, or the man I imagined him to be. Sarah nodded. Yeah, that's the hardest part. When someone dies, they don't just take their version of the truth. They take the chance to ever explain it. The fire cracked. Sparks rose. Somewhere, an owl called into the dark. They roasted marshmallows like two people who had once been children, but hadn't let themselves remember how that felt in years. Robert's first one caught fire. Sarah laughed. City boy. He grinned. Guilty. She pulled it off the stick, blew out the flame, and handed it to him. Their fingers touched brief, accidental, electric. He hesitated, then took it. Tell me something about your dad, he said. Something small. Sarah leaned back, eyes flickering with memory. He used to sing while he worked. Horrible voice, off-key, but always the same song. Ain't No Sunshine. Said it helped him find rhythm in the engine noise. Robert smiled softly. Mine hated music, said silence was more productive. That tracks, she muttered. Another pause. She spoke again. When my mom left, it broke him, not because she left, but because she didn't believe in what he was building. He said it was like losing a co-pilot in a storm. Robert's voice was barely a whisper. Did he ever stop? No, she said, but he stopped dreaming out loud. That was the worst part. Her voice cracked at the end. Not dramatic, just human. The sound of someone who had learned to cry quietly. The fire burned lower. The space between them shrank. He looked at her. Then, really looked, not at the mechanic, not the woman who fixed his car and challenged his empire. Just Sarah. Tired eyes, smudged hands, a soul so rooted in grit, it bloomed through concrete. You carry him, he said. She tilted her head. What? In your hands, your voice, the way you work. It's like he's still here. Her throat tightened. She didn't answer, because if she did, the tears would fall. Instead, she reached for another marshmallow, but her hand shook slightly. Robert noticed and gently covered it with his own. No pressure, no move, just warmth, like saying, you're not alone anymore, without needing to speak it. After a long time, she whispered, why do you keep coming back? He didn't lie. Because I feel more like myself here than I ever did in those glass offices. She turned to him. And who is that? I don't know yet, he said honestly, but I think you're helping me figure it out. The fire was just coals now, glowing, quiet. They sat side by side in the soft dark. Neither moved, neither confessed. But something shifted between them. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it, like two broken circuits finally making contact and realizing the current still flowed. Chapter 6. The reveal. The next few weeks were quiet. In a good way. Robert kept showing up, not just at the shop, but in real ways. He brought Chewie an old Lego engine set. He helped organize the shelves. He even started learning how to bleed brakes, much to Sarah's amusement. Something was forming between them. Not fast, not dramatic, just soft. Like two puzzle pieces finally realizing they fit. They didn't talk about what was happening, but the silence between them had changed. It felt warmer now, until the phone call. It came on a Thursday afternoon, hot, still, the kind of day where sweat slicked your neck before noon. Sarah was under the hood of a Dodge Charger when her phone buzzed on the bench. Unknown number. She ignored it. It rang again. Same number. Sighing, she wiped her hands and answered. Barnes and Sons. The voice on the other end was clipped, polished. Miss Barnes. This is Marcia Wellstone, head of PR and legal affairs at Mitchell Automotive. We'd like to discuss a press release regarding your father's legacy and his contributions to our early innovation systems. Sarah froze. Press release. Yes. Mr. Mitchell approved a statement this morning, and we'd like your participation in a tribute article being published in the Wall Street Journal this weekend. She gripped the phone tighter. Article. Yes. Honoring his memory and Mitchell Automotive's decision to publicly recognize his work posthumously. A beautiful narrative, really. Honoring the past, engineering the future. Sarah's throat went dry. And who wrote it? Corporate Affairs drafted the language. Of course. We'd include a quote from you. We've already scheduled a press photo of the restored manual beautiful piece. Her heart began to pound. You're using my father's work for a PR campaign. There was a pause. Well, yes. It aligns with our brand messaging legacy, humility, innovation, all very powerful themes. Sarah didn't answer, but her silence said everything. When Robert pulled up 20 minutes later, she didn't come out. He waited, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel like it might anchor him to the ground. She finally stepped out from the side of the shop, covered in grease, eyes blazing. She threw something onto the hood of his car, the Wall Street Journal mock-up, his photo on the front, smiling, holding her father's manual like a trophy. Underneath, the heart behind the horsepower, Robert Mitchell rewrites the legacy. He looked at her, stunned. Sarah, you didn't, what? She snapped. Didn't sign off on it. Didn't know your PR team was turning my father's life into your redemption tour. I never meant for this to be public. But it is. Her voice cracked. He spent his whole life being erased, and now he's being used. Again, and this time, it's with my help. Robert stepped forward. I was going to tell you, I swear. I had no idea the article was going live this week. You shouldn't have done it at all. The silence between them now was cold. Sharp. She backed up. You said you wanted to make it right. You said this wasn't about you. But somehow, your face still ends up on the front page. Because the company still has my name, he said quietly. But it doesn't have my heart anymore. You do. She looked at him hurt, disbelieving. Don't say that. But it's true. She shook her head. No, because if you really saw me, you would have protected him. You would have known what that photo would do. I'm trying. Sarah. She folded her arms, teeth clenched to hold back, everything rising in her throat. I didn't need your pity. I didn't need your charity. All I ever wanted was respect. And you gave me the same thing your father gave mine. She turned, walked away, back into the shop. This time, she didn't look back. That night, she sat alone at the fire pit. No flames, no stars, just silence. She held the manual in her lap, stared at her father's name, then at the photo of Robert smiling. She placed both on the woodpile. She couldn't burn them, but she wanted to. Sometimes the worst betrayals don't come from enemies. They come from the people who made you believe they saw you. And just when you start to hope again, they prove you were never more than a chapter in their story, never the whole book. Chapter 7. The Test. Sarah didn't return his calls. Not after the article, not after the photos, not after the voicemail that ended with his voice cracking around the words, "Please don't shut me out." She didn't respond because some silences are necessary, because trust, once cracked, doesn't get glued back together with apologies. It has to be tested. It has to survive fire. For 3 days, she poured herself into the shop like it was the only thing holding her together. She worked through the night, rebuilt an entire transmission, restored a 1969 Mustang for a retired veteran, helped Chewy with math homework between oil changes. She didn't cry, but every time she looked at her father's manual, something inside her whispered, "He took it from you, too. And worse, you let him." By Friday morning, her hands were shaking again, not from the work, from what she was holding back, grief, disappointment, that quiet ache of feeling foolish for believing just for a moment that someone could understand what it meant to carry a legacy built from silence and sacrifice. The final straw came with the letter. It arrived in a crisp white envelope. No return address. Inside, a glossy brochure for the Barnes Engineering Fellowship, sponsored by Mitchell Automotive. Her father's name, in bold. Her face, on the last page, a quote she never gave. "My father always believed in engines that could change the world. Now, we give others the chance to build them." Her hands shook. The walls began to close in. That night, she snapped. She called her old friend, Tommy, a fabricator in Knoxville, and told him she was selling the shop. The whole place, tools, lifts, the fire pit, the faded photo wall. "I can't breathe here anymore," she said. "You sure?" "No." But she said yes. The next morning, Robert pulled into the driveway to find a for sale sign staked into the ground. His heart dropped. He rushed inside. The bell above the door didn't even have time to finish ringing before he shouted, "Sarah." No answer. The shop was nearly empty. Shelves cleared. The back room swept clean. A single box left behind, taped and labeled. "True, keep." He found her out back, standing by the fire pit again. Her arms were crossed, jaw set. "You're selling it," he said, more a breath than a question. "I'm done," she replied, flat. "With what?" She looked at him then, eyes tired, red, alive, trying to preserve something that never got protected. "My father built this place with his bare hands. My mother left it. Cancer gutted it. And you," she paused, "you used it." He stepped closer. "That's not true, isn't it?" He reached into his coat and pulled out a folder, thick, heavy, bound. He handed it to her. "What is this?" "My resignation," he said, "from Mitchell Automotive." She froze. "You're what?" "I stepped down yesterday." Her voice broke. "Why?" "Because I can't run a company that doesn't know the difference between branding and truth. Because I let them publish your father's life like a feature story. And because if I stayed, I'd always be the man who took." She stared at him like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. He continued, softer now. "I've been rich my whole life, but I've never stood for anything. Until you." The wind stirred. The fire pit between them, still empty. "Leaving your company doesn't fix anything," she said. "I know, and you still didn't tell them to pull the program." "I'm not stopping it," he said. "But I rewrote every line, every credit, and I'm giving full ownership to you. Legally. It's in that folder." She opened it, flipped through the signatures. Her eyes widened. the entire fellowship, in her hands, fully hers. No conditions. He shook his head. No press. No press. She looked up. Why? He took a step forward. Because this isn't a test of your forgiveness, he said. It's a test of my truth. A long, aching pause. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She just breathed. For the first time in days, it didn't hurt. That night, she didn't light the fire pit. She just sat by it, alone, thinking, not about him, but about herself. Because sometimes the biggest test isn't how much you can forgive. It's how much you're willing to rebuild. After everything falls, Chapter 8. The breakdown. The night it happened. The sky cracked open over Brentwood. Rain fell like it was trying to drown the past. Sarah was driving back from Chewy's school fundraiser, silent beside him in the truck. He had fallen asleep in the passenger seat, candy apple still half wrapped in his hand. She kept her eyes on the road, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near his tiny, paint-smeared fingers. She had meant to call Tommy, meant to say yes to Knoxville, meant to let go of the shop once and for all. But something stopped her. Something unspoken, heavy, not love, not yet, but a thread, still pulling. That same night, Robert stood in the empty penthouse of the Mitchell Tower for the last time. He had cleared his desk, removed every trace of legacy, left behind only the framed portrait of his father, face astern, arms crossed beside an engine prototype. He stared at it and whispered, "You built an empire on silence. I'm going to build one on truth." Then he left it there, walked out, into the storm. It was near midnight when Sarah's truck slowed outside the shop. She saw it before she even parked. Robert's Chevelle, idling in the rain. He wasn't in it. She slammed the door open and ran toward the fire pit. And there he was, drenched, kneeling, trying to light a match that kept going out. She stopped, wind whipping her hair, voice half lost to the storm. "What are you doing?" He looked up, face soaked, eyes wild. "Trying to burn it," he said, in the rain. He held up the Wall Street Journal article, the one with his face. "I hate it," he said. Every line, every word. I thought stepping down would be enough, but it's not. I still see that smile, that smug, polished version of myself. I see him. Sarah stood in silence. Chewy had woken up now, watching through the truck window, small eyes wide. Robert dropped the match. It hissed out in the puddle. "I don't know how to fix it," he said. "Any of it. I just wanted to matter in the right way. I wanted to be more than my last name." She stepped closer. "You are." He blinked. "What dumb. You are more," she said again. "But not because of what you built or burned. Because you stayed when it got messy. When I hated you, you stayed." He looked at her then, completely undone, and said something he hadn't even admitted to himself. "I don't know how to love without controlling it." The rain softened, but not the moment. Sarah knelt beside him, not close, just near enough. "You don't have to control this," she said quietly. "Just feel it." He broke, not loud, not cinematic, just broke, his head in his hands, water pouring from the sky and from somewhere deeper, and she let him, because breakdowns don't need fixes. They need witnesses. Later, soaked to the bone, they sat shoulder to shoulder in the bed of her truck, wrapped in a thin, oil-smelling tarp. Chewy was asleep again inside. Robert stared ahead, quiet. "I was 5 when I watched my dad fire a man for crying," he said. "He said weakness was contagious." Sarah leaned her head back against the truck rail. "My dad cried every time the Titans lost, then went back to building engines." He smiled, barely. They sat in the dark, and for the first time, there were no walls, no past, no companies, no legacy, just a man and a woman, and the sound of the storm slowing down. Some breakdowns aren't the end. They're the beginning of becoming whole. Chapter 9. The Offer. The next morning, the storm was gone. The streets glistened like they'd been scrubbed clean. The leaves on the oak, outside the shop, hung heavier than usual, drenched, but shining in the soft gold light. Sarah stepped outside with her coffee and stood barefoot on the concrete stoop. The air smelled of rain and ash. In the fire pit, charred paper curled like broken wings. Robert had slept in the Chevelle, engine off, head resting back, and for the first time since she met him, his face looked unguarded, not tired, not perfect, just real. She knocked gently on the window. He blinked awake. Groggy. Coffee. He nodded. God. Yes. They sat on the tailgate of her truck. Again. Same spot. Same tarp folded beside them, watching the sun rise behind the garage. For a while, neither spoke. Then Sarah asked, "What are you going to do now?" He looked down into his mug. "I don't know. I'm no longer a CEO. I don't even own my own calendar anymore." She grinned softly. "You say that like it's a bad thing." He smiled too, then turned serious. "I was thinking of starting something. Small, honest. Something where I don't have to wear a mask or sign press releases." She waited. Then he said it. "I want to open a non-profit garage for veterans, single parents, people who can't afford repairs, free service, real training, in your father's name." Sarah's lips parted. He continued, voice calm but certain, "And I want you to run it with me." She stared at him. "This isn't another guilt project." He shook his head. "No, this time, it's a love project." The words hovered in the air, soft and raw. She didn't answer right away, just looked at the ground. He waited, not pushing, not pleading, just present. Then she spoke, her voice barely louder than the morning breeze. "Do you know what love means to me, Robert?" He turned to her. "What?" "It means you stay through the long days, through the broken things, through the messy parts no one claps for." He swallowed. "I want to stay for all of it." Her eyes lifted to his, and in that moment, something unlocked. Not because he said the right words, but because for once he didn't try to fix her. He just offered his hands. Later that day, Chewy helped Robert carry paint cans into the back room of the shop. "What color are we doing?" the boy asked. Robert grinned. "You decide." Chewy thought for a second. "Blue, like the sky right after rain." Robert ruffled his hair. "Perfect." Sarah stood in the doorway, watching them. A man who had once come here with ego and cash now crouched beside her nephew, laughing about brushes and drop cloths. Maybe healing wasn't always fireworks. Maybe it was this: paint on hands, quiet smiles, and the slow, unshakable sense that he was here to stay. That night, she stood outside the garage alone. She looked up at the stars, finally visible after days of cloud, and whispered, "You were right, Dad. Some engines just need to be heard." Chapter 10. The answer. The grand opening of the barn's garage and foundation wasn't grand at all. There were no photographers, no press releases, no CEOs cutting red ribbons, just folding chairs, a grill borrowed from a neighbor, lemonade in plastic cups, and a hand-painted sign over the door that read, "We fix what matters." Sarah stood under the awning in a soft blue dress, the kind she only wore to church or funerals. This time, it was neither. This time, it was for something being born. Robert was by the tool wall, showing a veteran how to change a timing belt, grease already on his hands, a smear on his cheek. Chewy ran by with a clipboard and a crayon, and for a moment, Sarah just watched. It had taken months after Robert's resignation, after the failed article, after the fire pit and the rain. Everything slowed down. They'd built something together, not fast, not flashy, but real, piece by piece. People came, neighbors, old friends of her father, students, women with broken down vans and no place else to go. And every time she told them, "We'll take care of it. No charge." Because some debts don't get paid in money. They get paid in legacy. That afternoon, when the crowd thinned and the sun hung lower over Brentwood, Robert walked up to her. No suit, no tib, just the same man she'd come to know, standing in the dust with calloused hands and quiet eyes. "You still haven't answered," he said gently. She tilted her head. "Answered what?" His voice dropped. "The question I never asked." She looked at him curious, soft. And he continued, heart in hand. "If I told you I was in love with the girl who rebuilt me and the garage that saved me, would you believe it?" Sarah didn't speak right away. She took a breath, then stepped closer and whispered, "Only if you promise never to fix me." He smiled, eyes watering. "I wouldn't dare." They didn't kiss then, not in front of everyone, not yet. They just stood in the fading light, her head resting against his chest, his arms around her shoulders. And that was the answer. Not words, not vows, not diamond rings, just the decision to stay. That night, after the chairs were folded, and Chewy fell asleep in the office with a wrench in his hand, Sarah and Robert sat at the fire pit again. No storm this time, just stars. He handed her a ring box. She stared at it. "I said not to fix me. It's not for that." She opened it. Inside wasn't a ring. It was a small silver key. "The garage," he nodded. "And the house, and the truck, everything. It's not mine anymore." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't want ownership," she whispered. "I want partnership." He smiled. "That's all I ever wanted to give." And finally, after loss, after silence, after the weight of stolen names and broken trust, she let him kiss her. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't movie perfect. It was quiet, earned, the kind of kiss that said, "We made it." Some love stories aren't loud. They aren't born in hotel lobbies or over candlelit dinners. Some love stories are built the way engines are, with patience, with pressure, with broken parts made whole again. And this was a true love story. One born not in riches or perfection, but in the space between pain and healing. What we carry. The garage was dark now, closed for the night. Just the hum of the street lamp above and the sound of crickets returning to their usual rhythm. Inside, Chewy slept on a cot, one hand curled around a socket wrench like it was a teddy bear. Sarah tucked a blanket over him, smiled, then stepped out the back. Robert was already there, seated on the old bench by the fire pit, hands resting in his lap, a mug of black coffee cooling beside him. No fire tonight, no need. They had nothing to burn, just each other. She sat beside him in silence. He didn't speak, but his hand found hers, and for a long while, they watched the sky, not searching for answers, just witnessing what remained. Sometimes, life doesn't give you closure. It gives you choice to keep carrying the weight or to turn it into something that builds. Sarah had carried her father's memory like a burden, but now she carried it like a blueprint, not for machines, but for love. Some love stories don't start with sparks. They start with screwdrivers, with stubbornness, with a challenge tossed across the hood of a car. And when they endure the storm, they become the kind of stories people tell around fire pits for years to come. Stories that begin with pain, but end in peace. That was our story today. A poor girl with grease on her hands, a billionaire CEO with ghosts in his bloodline, and a true love story built not on fantasy, but on healing. Tell us, what are your thoughts on this story? Leave a comment and rate it from 0 to 10. Make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell to follow all our latest stories. And don't miss out. Click here to watch more now. Each one is a journey, just like this one. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most powerful engine in the world is the heart.